Great. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm really grateful that you're here with us because we're going to talk about a really important topic that I'm not sure is getting the amount of attention it deserves and candidly that it needs, given the moment that we're in. Obviously, there's been a lot of ways in which the coronavirus, COVID-19, has wreaked havoc across our community, and ways in which we as a community are struggling to address it and struggling to respond to it. But one in which that I don't think for many people is going to be the first way that they think about this, or the first thing that they think of, is what this virus has done and is doing, and is going to do to folks that perhaps were already in vulnerable circumstance, that were with that social contact, that community with others was so critical to preserve their own health and their safety. And what I wanted to do this afternoon was to use this time with an extraordinary activist and advocate and just a dedicated member of our community, Marcia, Szymanski, who's been leading New Hope, which is a shelter based in Attleboro, Massachusetts, so south of Boston, but that serves a large swath of the community there, to talk about what this pandemic is doing for folks that are in abusive relationships, what she's seeing as somebody who's heads the shelter and is a critical care point for people that are facing abuse and confronting abuse, but then also advice for the rest of us about ways in which we can continue to reach out, not just to folks that you might think would need a hand, but for one of the real challenges with these circumstances for folks that don't. Domestic violence is at its core, it's a crime of power. It's a crime of isolation. And so when people are withdrawn to your homes, you don't have that interaction, this can get very dangerous very, very quickly. So what she's seeing, advice for the rest of us, and if you end up being in need, what it is that you can do in order to make sure we can get access to assistance. So Marcia, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and please take it away.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you, Joe. And I really appreciate you taking time to highlight this issue, because in times of disasters, we see that lots of issues emerge that people don't think a lot about. And one of them is domestic violence and sexual violence. So it's great to have this format to talk about this. And I just want to stress that pandemics, disasters don't cause domestic violence. These things are, as you mentioned so well, it's about power and control. So when these things emerge, they just create extra stress that just exacerbates the situation. So I don't want people, I know there was an article recently in the Globe about, shutting down all the liquor stores because then we won't have domestic violence. Drinking may make the problem worse, but it doesn't cause sexual and domestic violence. So I just want to start with that. But yes, we're hearing and seeing lots of things that are very troubling. As you mentioned, when we're self-isolating, isolation is a trick of an abuser. That's one of the ways they maintain power and control. So if someone is not able to go out and connect with their support system, the level of stress and the anxiety just goes through the roof. And we're hearing that. Initially, I think when it first started, our hotline calls were down, and that's a reflection of the fact that people don't have the access to call in a private space. Maybe their abuser is not at work because they've lost their job, or maybe they work different hours, so now this person is home all the time with this person who's their abuser, and so they don't have the ability to reach out. We are seeing hotline calls beginning to come back to previous levels, so people are beginning to reach out in different ways, or maybe finding ways. I know going to a grocery store or a pharmacy sometimes allows people a little bit of privacy to make a call, to reach out to us. But we're seeing a lot more stress and anxiety, people having panic attacks, people being triggered. We know that oftentimes the abuser will try to control things like access to masks or to gloves or, personal disinfectants, trying to stop them from getting medical care, withholding medications. And all of this is just making a really difficult situation even worse. So, we're hearing all those stories. And then for a lot of our clients, we're hearing they've lost jobs. You know, so many people have lost jobs. So you add the financial burdens of how are we going to pay the rent? What are we going to do for food? And it just is really a very dangerous situation. And then having to choose between, do I go out and risk the virus? Do I stay in and risk violence? It's a no-win situation for people. And we also know that some people are afraid to go into shelter because, you know, congregant living is also not an easy place to self-isolate or to distance, you know, hold that 6 feet barrier between yourself and someone else. So we have actually moved our shelter residents out to an extended stay hotel just because we know congregant living is so hard and people were having trouble with it. So we just decided to be a little more proactive and move folks out so they could self-isolate. So they would each have their own bathrooms. If someone is testing positive, that was one of the things. Well, have them use a separate bathroom. Well, it's great if you have a bathroom for everyone in a shelter, but you don't always have that. So, but the other thing is, even if you're not living with the abuser, you know, if you have children together, sometimes the abuser may, if the abuser has custody, they may want to withhold your visits with the child. So there's lots of issues, lots of things we're hearing. People are being re-triggered. The other concern is that it's a lot more difficult to reach the courts these days. We were in 8 courthouses and they all have different rules, requirements. The courts did recently set up an 800 number that people can now access, but it's been really hard for people to come in, think about getting a restraining order, and you know, it has to happen virtually. They've oftentimes been told, we'll go in your car and we'll do it from your car. Well, it's great if you have a car, not everybody has a car. So there's been lots of issues with that. Also, we're hearing that the police, while they are responding, that they're not necessarily arresting people. So if police are called and then they leave, most likely there's going to be an increase in violence that's going to happen there. And the abuser is still there with the survivor. So we're hearing a lot of stories that are really, really difficult to hear. And I would say that the level of high-risk clients that we're working with is probably as high as it's ever been in the 5+ years I've been at New Hope. So, and then we also know that some people are getting released from jails. What I understand is if they're in jail or incarcerated for domestic or sexual violence, they're not being let out. But if they have another issue that they're incarcerated for, maybe now they're going to be let out. And we're working with a number of clients right now who their abuser is scheduled to be let out of jail and they've made some horrendous threats against folks. So it's really very difficult. It's a very difficult time.
Have you seen an increase in the number of people calling in need of services, or you said you saw that I think it initially decreased?
Initially it dropped. It's coming back up. Yep, definitely. I think the first week we were in isolation, I think we worked with about 200 survivors. I don't know what the latest number is, but it's definitely coming up. I know that my counselors, we do have counselors and advocates that do community-based work, and they are pretty much at capacity in terms of you know, their caseload. So what we're trying to do now is set up some virtual groups so we can work with folks that way.
Like, walk me through that. I remember you had mentioned before how critical those little gaps in the day were, right? If somebody went out for, obviously, oftentimes not the victim here, but if the abuser goes out to the grocery store, the abuser goes off to work, that's the window that a victim
That's
would have
right.
to reach out to get it.
Right. Right, to reach out.
As you remember, a domestic violence prosecutor for a year, and we had a high-risk task force, and we would down with various folks involved in that, and it was they had somebody that would go volunteer when there were those breaks of time to come in and bolt a deadbolt on the inside of a closet where somebody could go hide and lock themselves in if need be. But you needed that gap in time, right? You needed base to be able to have the check-in. what do people do now, and what should we be on the lookout for? Because this is one of, as you mentioned, I talked about before, the isolation is such a critical piece here. Those other
Exactly.
interactions or the chance to people connect. What should we be looking for here to try to make sure that people don't fall through these cracks?
Well, I think if you suspect anyone maybe, in an abusive situation, whether it's domestic or sexual violence, the most important thing is reaching out, letting them know you're there. And if you have the opportunity, even if you have to stand across a fence in a yard, if it's a neighbor or someone, maybe coming up with some sort of code word that you can use that might, even if you just text the person, I don't know, avocado or some word that's senseless to let them know that, hey, I'm in trouble, I need help, kind of thing, because they don't have that window. That's one of the issues. And that's why I did suggest, and one of the things we're trying to do is put some information out in grocery stores and pharmacies, because that is the one place that perhaps a survivor can go because they need food, they have to buy food, they have to maybe pick up medication or supplies at a pharmacy. So we may be able to, that might be the opportunity when they can reach out to us. So, the other thing is if the person, now the weather's nice, there's yard work to be done, maybe the abuser would be out in the yard working. So we're hoping that with springtime and, people want to get out, that might allow a little bit more time, maybe walking a dog if they have a pet or something. So trying to think of ways that they can sort of get outside of that. But it can be really hard because we know that, from your work, these abusers know every trick in the book and they are highly, highly manipulative. And they will use things like, I'm going to kill the pet, or I'm going to, go after your family. So they use so many techniques to manipulate people that, they really are masters at it, unfortunately.
Have you, are there ways that folks, given that obviously we're doing this over Zoom and Facebook, one of I remember this probably as long as I live, I was about to try a case with an abuser, a mom, 3 kids, a second husband. And she came in for the trial date with a black eye. And said that her newborn had given her a black eye because he knocked her head. But it was the visual, right? It was me looking at her, and phone calls don't do that, right? So are there ways in which, are there opportunities here, whether it's a little bit awkward to all of a sudden FaceTime somebody you don't necessarily know quite as well, or down for a Zoom. Are there ways here where, look, just getting eyeballs on people matters, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so New Hope, we've worked really hard in a short period of time to try to give people different options. First and foremost, we encourage people to call our hotline, which is 1-800-323-4673. And that will, we always have a live person answering the hotline. There's no answering machine. There's no answering service. It's always a New Hope employee answering the hotline. And we can then let them know what their other options are. So we do have, we've just set up this week a web chat. So it's limited hours now. We're hoping to expand it, but people can go onto our website and they can click on the web chat and they can chat with someone if they don't want to do the face-to-face. Sometimes people feel more comfortable, particularly I know young people feel more comfortable with a web chatting, so they can actually talk to someone online through the web chat. And then when they're done, it completely disappears. There's no record kept of it. It's not stored anywhere. It's not stored in a cloud. So when they leave and we leave, the whole text disappears. So that's one option. We also have a video conferencing feature we use. It's not Zoom, but we use one that is HIPAA compliant. So that people, it's a one kind of facial thing. I haven't used it myself, but my counselors tell me it works really well. And if they call the hotline, we can connect them and help them figure out how to get connected to that one-on-one HIPAA compliant conversation. And then they can always do phone calls with counselors and advocates if they need something. So I know a lot of people are looking for help with food, which we have some food supplies, diapers, things of that nature that we're giving to people. We're also directing them to food pantries. We're giving gift cards out to survivors who may need to buy groceries and don't have it. So we're doing that. And that's the other thing. I just want to say one other thing I forgot that adds to the stress is just having their children at home all the time. You know? If you're used to having your kids at school and you can do some things for yourself, well, now, you know, maybe you've got the whole day where you've got to work with your child or your children. And then the kids are maybe witnessing violence that they hadn't witnessed before. So that's also another factor, is that, you know, there's going to be a whole lot of children who are going to need services when this is over. You know, it used to be when kids went to school, when they were in school, there were people who were mandated reporters if they suspected that something was going on that would, you know, sort of tip people off that maybe this family's in trouble and we need to help out. But, you know, when everyone's just in the house isolated, it's hard to know the families who are in trouble. But I would just urge people, if you have any suspicions about someone, reach out, let them know you're there. You know, it's a little trickier these days, but whatever you can do to just, even if they act like, you know, no, I'm fine, and they hang up the phone, you know, just keep at it. You know, it's just important for people to know that someone is there.
So you
Joe, you're breaking up a little on me. Joe, I think you broke up on me. I couldn't hear you. Oh, hello?
So can you hear me?
Okay, I got you. Yep. Maybe not.
I'm back.
Okay, hey.
There we go. Sorry about that. The power and stuff is going in and out here with the storm. So what I was going to say was you brought up a really, I think, important point, which was not just the crisis that we're in at this moment, but what needs to be done as we come out of it. You talked about the exposure of children perhaps to tension, anxiety, and violence that they haven't seen before. A lot of the focus from these various packages that Congress has moved through to combat Corona has been on the healthcare sector, small businesses, finances, all that, and obviously rightfully so. But we need to make sure that folks that are victimized by this pandemic, and that doesn't necessarily mean the respiratory system in a hospital, but these victims and children are protected and looked after. What should we be focused on as we start to craft what this fourth package looks like? What should we be focused on to get this right going forward?
I know one thing you've been really vocal about is mental health coverage. You know, I mean, people are going to need a lot of mental health support. I mean, New Hope, we don't charge for our services. We don't take insurance, and we're happy to help any survivor. But, you know, there's going to be a huge need that we can't obviously meet. And I think first and foremost, if we can have more mental health coverage for folks, that would be amazing. The other thing is, it's great that the CARE Act did, I think it's no charge for testing, but people need to, perhaps if they are testing positive, they're going to need medical treatment and medical care. So anything you can do around that. And then also the people who need the checks in the mail the most are the people who were left out of the CARE Act. So people who were maybe not filing taxes because their income is so low or they're on disability. These are oftentimes the people who are cleaning our buildings and doing the deliveries of our food if we want to order out, or working in the grocery stores. I mean, these are the people who really need the support, and it feels like they really got left out of the CARE Act, you know, in terms of, I understand you have to have a way to find these folks to give them support, but they really need financial support. And those are a lot of the folks that we are working with who are working 2 and 3 jobs and really trying to make ends meet. So I think those are some of the things that would be really important.
And yeah, I appreciate that. And I know you say that as April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Yes.
And many of those victims are really struggling at this moment. What is it that you would say? What's the last bit of advice to try to offer anybody that is suffering from either physical violence or sexual violence at this point to try to get access to the care and treatment and help that they need?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say first off, reach out to New Hope. If you're in the catchment area for New Hope, which goes all the way from Taunton all the way out to Southbridge. And again, that's 1-800-323-4673. But I know you have a wide area that you cover. And I just want to give also the Safe Link hotline, which is statewide if people need help, which is 877-785-2020, and people should reach out to the Safe Link as well, and they can help whether someone's domestic or sexual violence. And I want to say that oftentimes domestic and sexual violence go together, so people who are suffering with domestic violence experience sexual violence in that relationship more times than people might think. And we know that sexual violence is very prevalent as well. So 1 in 3 women, I think, will experience some sort of physical, sexual, stalking violence in their lifetime. So thank you for recognizing Sexual Assault Month. That's really important.
Of course. Marcia, any last pieces that we've missed or anything that you want to make sure that people are aware of or can do to help at this point?
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want people to know, anyone out there struggling, or even if you're not in a situation at the moment, but sometimes this will trigger something. People will have a triggering to past events. Please call New Hope, please reach out or go to our website and click on the link for web chat, or, text us through Facebook or some of our social media. I mean, we're really here to help. Our offices are closed, but we're working remotely, and we really want people to reach out and let them know that we are here for them. We want to help, and we will do whatever we can to make them safe as possible. So I think that's the main thing, just to let people know we're here. And again, if you suspect someone's in a domestic violence situation, please reach out to them and let them know you're available, that you believe them, and you want to be a resource to them.
Marcia, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Joe, for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, have a good one.
Bye.